Imagine retiring at 52 with $1 million invested and then losing thousands of dollars. Not because the market crashed, not because you spent too much, but simply because you withdrew your own money in the wrong order. That's the mistake many early retirees never think about. They spend decades obsessing over how much they need to retire. But almost no one asks the equally important question: once I retire, which account should I actually withdraw from first? Because $50,000 from a brokerage account, $50,000 from a traditional IRA, and $50,000 from a Roth may all pay the same bills, but they can create completely different tax consequences. Get this wrong for several years, and the damage can quietly compound. So let's look at a smarter way to think about your withdrawals in early retirement. Let's meet David. David retires at 52 with $1.5 million. He has $400,000 in a taxable brokerage account, $700,000 in a traditional 401k and IRA, and $400,000 in Roth accounts. David needs $70,000 a year to live. At first, his plan seems obvious. He has plenty of money in his retirement accounts, so why not just withdraw what he needs? Here's the problem. David is still under 59 and a half. Depending on where the money comes from and whether he qualifies for an exception, an early retirement account distribution can potentially trigger regular income taxes and an additional 10% tax. So David might think, fine, I'll avoid my traditional accounts completely and spend my brokerage account first. And that sounds smarter, but even that can create another problem, because David has something incredibly valuable that many retirees don't recognize until it's gone: a low-income window. Think about what just happened. 1 year ago, David was earning a full salary. Today, his paycheck has disappeared. But Social Security hasn't started yet. Required distributions aren't forcing taxable income onto his tax return. And he may now have several years where he has unusually high control over how much taxable income he creates. Those years can be incredibly valuable. So instead of asking, which account should I completely empty first, a better question might be, how should I use these accounts together? David could use his taxable brokerage account for part of his living expenses. But at the same time, he might deliberately recognize some income from his traditional accounts, or strategically convert part of that money to a Roth. A Roth conversion can create taxable income in the year of the conversion, which is exactly why the timing matters. There's another piece David might not think about right away: his health insurance. Before Medicare begins at 65, many early retirees rely on marketplace coverage, and the subsidies that reduce what they pay for that coverage can depend heavily on household income. If David fills up his low-income years with large Roth conversions, he might unintentionally push his taxable income high enough to lose valuable subsidies. So the decision isn't just about taxes today or taxes later. It can also quietly affect what he pays for healthcare every single month in between. There's also a timing risk that has nothing to do with taxes at all. It's called sequence of returns risk. Imagine two versions of David. One retires right before a strong market. The other retires right before a downturn. Even if their long-term average returns end up identical, the retiree who withdraws money during a downturn can permanently lock in losses simply because he sold shares while prices were low. This is exactly why having accessible cash, short-term reserves, or flexible assets outside retirement accounts can matter so much in those early years. It can give David the flexibility to avoid selling his growth investments at the worst possible time, letting his retirement accounts recover before he touches them. The key idea is simple. The account funding your lifestyle does not always have to be the same account driving your tax strategy. And that's where withdrawal sequencing gets interesting. Because let's say David spends only his taxable account for years. It feels great. His tax bill might stay relatively low. But meanwhile, his traditional retirement account remains untouched and may continue growing tax-deferred. Later in retirement, that larger account may create more taxable withdrawals, and combined with Social Security, that could eventually push David into a higher bracket than he ever experienced while working. David saved taxes today, but possibly created a bigger tax problem tomorrow. Now let's go in the opposite direction. What if David says, forget all of that, I'll just spend the Roth money he can access without unnecessary taxes or penalties? That can also be a mistake. Yes, Roth money can provide tremendous flexibility, and qualified Roth distributions can be tax-free, but that's exactly what makes those dollars so valuable. Imagine David removes $100,000 from his Roth at 52. At an assumed 7% annual return, that same $100,000 could potentially grow to more than $500,000 over the next 25 years. And if the eventual distributions qualify, that growth could potentially come out tax-free. So the question isn't only, can I access this money? The better question is this really the best money to spend right now? Or is it more valuable left alone to grow? This is why the traditional advice of simply spending taxable money first, traditional money second, and Roth money last can sometimes be too simplistic. For many early retirees, the smarter strategy may involve all three accounts, adjusted year by year based on what's actually happening in that specific year. Your taxable account can provide flexible spending money and protect you from selling low during a downturn. Your traditional accounts can potentially be used strategically during lower income years, especially before Social Security and Medicare begin. And your Roth can remain a valuable source of tax flexibility for later, when required distributions from other accounts may already be pushing your income higher than you'd like. The goal isn't necessarily to pay the least possible tax this year. The goal is to manage your taxes across your entire retirement, sometimes even choosing to pay a little more now to avoid paying a lot more later. And that brings us to the real mistake. The wrong withdrawal order isn't always withdrawing from one specific account first. The real mistake is withdrawing money without looking ahead. So before you retire early, ask yourself 4 questions. Where will my spending money come from before age 59 and a half? How much taxable income am I creating each year? And how does that affect things like healthcare costs? Am I wasting years where my taxable income could be unusually low? And am I spending my most tax-flexible money earlier than necessary, when it could be growing untouched instead? Because 2 people can retire with the same $1.5 million at the same age, with the same investments, and still end up with very different outcomes. Not because one was a better investor, but because one had a better withdrawal strategy. In early retirement, building the portfolio is only half the job. The order in which you take the money out can matter just as much as how you put it in. And sometimes, the most expensive retirement mistake isn't running out of money. It's using the right money at the wrong time.